Thank you. And thanks for coming, and whoever's online, thanks for listening as well. So what I'm going to cover for the next approximately an hour is looking at ChatGPT and how we can apply it to software testing. So the topics I'm going to cover, first one is going to do a basic introduction to ChatGPT and large language models. I'm not just going to concentrate on ChatGPT because there are alternatives, and some alternatives you may find are better than ChatGPT. Having introduced it, next I'm going to look at how we can use it for software testing. A number of people have already looked at this, and I've looked at some of their ideas, and I've come up with a list of 10 potential areas where we can actually use it for software testing, some of which are more useful than others. And finally, in the next steps part, I'll look at the architecture of large language models and how we can build extensions to those models. ChatGPT costs a massive amount of money to actually create in the first place. On the other hand, we now have the possibility of building on top of those models. So finally, I'll be looking at an SDA testing co-pilot, and potentially how everyone who's a member of SDA can actually get involved in building that testing co-pilot. So building some AI, hopefully at the cutting edge of technology. Okay, so how can we use these for software testing? And I played with ChatGPT and Bing AI for a while, and then tried to work out what it could do. So this list of 10 here is what I eventually came up with. It started about the same, but I took some off, added some on. What I'm going to do next is take you through, for about, I think for 7 of these, I've got examples to show you the sort of thing that you would get. So that you can read it on the screen, I've cut and pasted from the different models rather than screen recording, because the size would be too small for you to read. So one of the areas where I think it is really good is this first one here, the test idea generator. And I suggest, if you're a tester, I assume some of the people in the room are testers. If you're a tester and you want ideas on how to test something, it's really good. So here's me asking it a question, or, well, not even asking a question, I'm actually telling it to do something, which is fine. It doesn't mind you doing that. And so nice and polite, give me ideas on how to test an e-commerce website. Sure, here are some ideas on how to test an e-commerce website. And then it gives a really nice list. If you've never done this before, if you've never tested an e-commerce website, this is really useful. Of course, if you do it on a day-to-day basis, it might not be so useful. But on the other hand, why would you be asking it if you did it every day? It's there to help you for things you don't know, not just to confirm what you do know. So it's going to tell us do some functional testing, do some performance testing, do some usability testing. All good stuff, and the text is okay. It's not wrong. Do some security testing, do some compatibility testing. Yeah, why not? Content testing, regression testing. So it's obviously gone to lots of websites and found out loads of good information. And we've even got some quite specialist stuff here, A/B testing, and then user acceptance testing, and then specialist stuff for the payment gateway. So these are not just generic suggestions for every app. It knows that these actually are applicable to an e-commerce website. So it's actually giving us good advice. And it comes up with a disclaimer at the bottom. So these are just a few ideas. Depending on the complexity of features, you'll need to customize your testing, obviously. I mean, yeah, obviously, otherwise there wouldn't be jobs for testers anywhere. And if you don't actually like what it tells you, you ask it to regenerate the response. If you ask it to regenerate the response from the same prompt, what you're likely to get is about 80% of similar content, but you might get another area that you need to test. A lot of the time you'll find that you don't really ask the question, right? You could have come up with a better prompt to get it to give you what you wanted, in which case, have another go. Rewrite the prompt and see if it comes back with a better solution. But the test idea generator, I think, is great. I've tried it on lots of different areas, and it gives you good stuff. I've not seen it give me anything wrong, because all it's doing is giving me ideas. And I have to look at those ideas and decide if they apply to my particular situation. So you have to use some intelligence. It's not going to do everything for you. These things can't test your software. They're language models. They can't interact with software. They can only give you ideas or text or whatever. They can generate test cases if you ask the right question. But you have to decide if what it gives you is useful. But I think if you don't know, and it's a new area you're testing, then these will give you some ideas. Requirements review, well, yeah, they're very, I mean, it works brilliantly at working out if the text you've given it is written in good grammatical English. There's actually a really special bit built for one of the APIs. If you feed the stuff into there and ask for a grammatical check, it will tell you exactly where all the grammatical mistakes or where the improvements could be made. But this here, I wasn't looking for grammar. I was actually wanting it to check the requirements. Are they good requirements? And again, I'm sticking with the e-commerce website. So, well, I've got a long list there, but I'm not going to read them through, even though I know that they'll come up better with the Korean. I'll just concentrate on a couple of them. Has anyone spotted that some of these requirements might not be perfect? Maybe you need to read faster, and I apologise, I haven't got time to give you that. Here we go. An AI chatbot will provide customer support, although a backup run by trained monkeys will also be available. Okay. Well, not sure about that one. In the UK anyway, trained monkeys don't work too well on e-commerce site support. And I'm guessing they're not going to work here either. So from a human perspective, this is not a very good requirement. A more subtle one, users can buy products as guests, but they will pay by cash. There's no payment information is available. So they're going to have to actually get their notes out, stick them into a paper plane, fly them out the window, and hope the paper plane lands in the right place. Paying by cash on an e-commerce website, not really possible. So the thing is, does ChatGPT work out that these aren't possible? So it comes back, based on the requirements, here's a summary of the key features. Well, it's read both of these and repeated them. So it knows they're there, and it says overall, the website seems to have most of the essential features that are required for an e-commerce website. Okay. However, some additional details, such as the specific payment gateways that will be integrated and the types of products that will be sold, would need to be clarified. It doesn't seem to care about the monkeys or the fact that we can pay cash. So I thought, well, you know, let's give it more of a chance. Review the requirements for testability. And I've given it some payment details and told it that we're going to sell sports shoes. So based on the updated information provided, here's a review of the requirements, blah, blah, blah. The backup support option run by trained monkeys should also be tested to ensure that it provides adequate support. Well, it's still not highlighting that this is a weird requirement. In fact, it's telling me I should test it. And the same for the cash payments. The payment should also be tested. So in summary, testability, fine. Oh, okay. Well, I don't think this is going to help me. It's not got any common sense. I mean, lots of people don't have common sense, but ChatGPT really hasn't common sense. Most people would spot those were not possible, but it didn't do it. And to be fair to it, I gave it lots of opportunities. Never spotted it. Okay, how about using it as a testing guide? Because with the testing ideas, it tells us that we should do different types of testing. If we ask it about different types of testing, it will then say, oh, you could use different techniques. One of the techniques it recommended was using boundary value analysis. And I just thought, well, imagine I don't know anything about boundary value analysis. I'll ask it to tell me how to use boundary value analysis. How do I generate test cases? So please explain boundary value analysis. And really quickly, test design technique that involves testing the boundaries of input values. The goal is to test the behavior of the system at the edges or boundaries of the input domain, where errors are more likely to occur. This technique helps to identify defects that occur when input values are at the upper or lower limits of their valid range. Now, this all sounds really good. If you're not familiar with boundary value analysis, if you're familiar with boundary value analysis, one of the things that should be coming to mind is that it's only talking about input values. It doesn't talk about anything happening inside or any of the output values. And if we're doing boundary value analysis, we have to consider those as well. So if you're a naive user of this, it's pushing you away. It's limiting what you're going to be able to do. And you probably wouldn't notice because it all sounds very credible because all the other words are correct. I mean, this is all correct if I'm only talking about the input domain. But if I'm talking about the whole thing, I'm going to miss out. So it gives me an example. Oh, that's nice. So the website may have a minimum order quantity of 1. Well, obviously, we can't have anything less than 1, and a maximum order quantity of 10. So it's given me a nice example. With boundary value analysis, you would test the system's behavior, blah, blah, blah. Now, it then gives me values, which I think is really nice. And it gives one, so remembering we're at 1 and 10, it says 1, 2, 10, 9, and 11. And I'm thinking, well, that's really good. That looks good. But what happened to 0? My system's always crashed when I put 0 in. What if I tried to order 0 pairs of shoes? I'd want to test that, wouldn't I? Because it's actually telling me here, when the order quantity is at the boundary values of 1 and 10, as well as just inside and just outside those values. So if it's 1 to 10, just outside is 11 and 0. But it's not told me about 0. And again, this is quite dangerous, I think, if you're a naive user and you don't know the technique in detail. So let's help it. So let's agree that the minimum order quantity is 1, like it suggested. Does that mean I don't need to test for 0 if I'm performing boundary value analysis? Well, So I'm giving it a real clue here, but what does it say? 0 would not be a valid input for the order quantity, and it would not be considered a boundary value for this scenario. But, okay, so it doesn't like 0, but it's still saying I've got to test just inside and outside the values of 1 and 10. If the minimum order quantity is 1, you would not need to test with a quantity of 0 when performing boundary value analysis, as it's not a valid input for this scenario. So I'm now sort of thinking, well, it's now suggesting that it only tests valid inputs. But then it says, no, you've got to test for edge cases and invalid inputs. So it's now contradicting itself. So, yeah, okay, let's see if I can give it more of a clue. I'm confused. Isn't 0 just outside the valid values and so should be tested as part of boundary value analysis? Now it gets polite. You are correct. My apologies for the confusion. It's bad when it apologizes because basically a lot of the time it's just going to ignore you. What does it tell me? So it's apologized. And then it says, if the order quantity range is defined as being from 0 to some maximum value, then 0 would be a valid input and should be tested. Well, just a minute. How can I have 0 pairs of shoes? I can't order 0 pairs of shoes. And it's already told me that 1 is the minimum value. So to try and get 0 into it, it's now changed the requirement. Well, this is no good. You can't change the requirement. That's just cheating. And it's not useful. So, okay, that's no good for me then. Let's go back. But we assumed that the minimum order value is 1, not 0. You are correct. I apologise for confusion. If the okay, so does it actually give me 0? Well, 0 would not be a valid input and would not need to be tested. Once ChatGPT has got the idea in its mind, and obviously in its memory, it is really difficult to persuade it to change its mind. Testing with a quantity of 0 would not be necessary, as it is not a valid input for this scenario. So these words obviously appear on the internet somewhere or appeared on the internet somewhere enough times for ChatGPT to be really sure of this. So why don't we test invalid inputs as part of boundary value analysis if they are just outside a valid set of values? So I'm trying to really give it some clues here, but I've really pushed it to say, give me some invalid values. What does it give me? -1 and 11. It still won't give me 0. So it's like, well, yeah, you can have some invalid values, but I'm not going to give you 0 because I've already told you that we're not doing 0. 0 is just not on the table. So given that the minimum order quantity is 1 and the maximum is 10, then you say that -1 and 11 are test inputs. But 0 would not be. And again, yes, you're correct. Why would we do that? 0 would not be tested as part of boundary value analysis, in this case, blah, 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 for the same reasons as before. So it sounds really good, but it's not giving me the right answers. And 0 is really a value that I would want to be tested in that situation. So far you've said that boundary value analysis based on inputs. I've given up on the 0 thing at this point. I can't get it to let me test with 0. But so far it's just told me that I'm testing with input values. I really want it to also tell me that I can test with output values as well. So, but what about testing output boundaries? For instance, the e-commerce website might have a maximum number of items that it displays as a result of a search. Wouldn't boundary value analysis try to exercise this output boundary? Yes, you are correct. Now, if it's going to tell me I'm correct about this, why doesn't it explain why for the last 13 responses, it's only talked about input values? However, so now it's telling me I'm correct, and actually it can also apply to output values. Yeah, but yeah, it's dangerous because it sounds really good. It gives you nearly the right set of results, but doesn't give you the full set of results. So what about document generation? And you can see here I've jumped over to Bing AI to give you a bit of different a different system, but they're both based on the same underlying foundation model. So can you create a defect report from text? Because I hate writing defect reports. They all have to be in a particular format, and I always forget some of the fields. And it'd be really nice if everything just got filled in for me. So can you create a defect report from text? Hello, this is me. Oh, surprise. I can help you create a defect report from text. Let me get emojis for Bing. A defect report is a document that describes a problem or an error in a software system. Oh, don't even try to get them to talk about errors and failures and defects. Don't go down that hole. You can't persuade to use the right terminology. Anyway, it usually contains information such as, and then tells me what a defect report should have. To create a defect report from text, you need to provide me with some text. Oh yeah, that seems fair. I will then try to extract the relevant information. Blah, blah, blah. I may not be able to write a complete or accurate defect report if the text is too vague, so don't be too vague. Do you have some text? Well, surprise, surprise, yes, I do. And, well, don't worry about this. This is just some text I grabbed off the web, and I fed it this text. Thank you for providing me with some text, blah, blah, blah. Based on the text and some web searches, here is a possible defect report. And it then generates a defect report. This is brilliant. This is saving me so much time because it's not in actually the format I need it in, because it's just used some format off of the web, but it's actually extracted all the information. And the way it's extracted the information is brilliant. Just as good as human, as far as I can tell, anyway. So generating defect reports from text, really great, but of course I don't actually want it in that format. So I want it to follow my template for defect reports. Now, yeah, it took me 6 attempts to get Bing to actually allow me to do this. And because it just kept coming, no, I'm not allowed to do that. And you had to, eventually I came up with the right words and it decided it would let me do it. And then it generated, so I then gave it the template. The template I gave it was copied out of the ISO standard, so should be okay. Gave it to Bing. Thanks for giving me a different template and the text, and then it generated a defect report based on my template. Absolutely brilliant. I love this. This actually got, anyone who looks at this, the ISO standard will find that there is actually a ChatGPT generated defect report in it now as an example. So that was impressive. Did you struggle with understanding what was required for any of the headings? Because I'm worried about my ISO standard being a good description. And I did not struggle with understanding anything. It liked the template. Brilliant. So ChatGPT and Bing will both work this way. So if you give them unformatted text, you give them a template, they will take that and create formatted text for you. Really useful, in my opinion. What about document checking? Because if I've got this template, then presumably some of my job at times when I receive these reports is going to be checking that the reports I get follow the template. Well, actually, if I ask it to please check if the following report follows the template, it checks that for me. Again, really nice. Lovely. So, useful things. What about test data creation? Well, I thought, well, not really into test data, but how about creating anonymized test data for 10 Native Americans? Because I don't know anything about Native Americans, but very little anyway. And sure, here's an example set of anonymized test data for 10 Native Americans. And I stopped it at this point because I'm looking down the names and I'm not sure if this translates, but we've got a Kim here, we've got a Lee here. Well, maybe they're real Native Americans. We've got a John Smith, which is the most common name in the UK. And we've got Maria Cruz, which must be, I guess, the most common name in Spain. These aren't Native American names. So why is it giving me this rubbish? I didn't know it was polite. Those names don't look typical of Native Americans. You are correct. Apologise for that mistake. Why did it make the mistake? It's a computer. I should have used more common Native American names. Here's an updated table with more culturally appropriate names. And now I get a table with culturally appropriate names. Those, presumably, I don't know enough about it, but they look like they could well be Native American names. Great. But it's only given me 4 entries. I asked for 10. It was only 2 questions ago, not 10. Oh, you are correct. I apologise for that mistake. It's great at apologising. You have to watch it all the time. It's really lazy. I wanted 10. It's trying to save bandwidth, I think, or maybe processing, who knows. I also read stuff that said that if you get test data off of these systems, it's not always fully anonymised. So be really careful that it's not actually giving you real data if you're asking for anonymised test data. So if we look at the 10 areas that I looked at, and I've shown you about 7 there, the ones in green I think are great. These are things I would recommend that we use straight away. The ones in this orangey colour, work is needed on them because as they are, they're quite dangerous because they sound confident, but you can't trust them.